Right, this is going to be another episode of the Best Damn League Show, period. And the guest for this one, / co-host, is Nymaera. So we've already had him on the last split. He is on again. Obviously, Nymaera, what an interesting detail people might not be aware of, because this just proves not everyone who says they watch the LPL watches the LPL. A lot of you might not be aware. The LPL just kept running during the EWC because they have so many teams they could just run without top esports, obviously. So they actually were the one league that was still running completely. And obviously we did just have EWC as well. I will say, I won't go into a whole thing, but when I saw some of that weird discourse on Twitter about like the viewership of EWC, I noticed the original guy, if you saw that, it was one that was like signal boosted by people like Jacob Wolf. The original post was even deleted at this point in time. And I'm guessing because there must have been some actual sane person replied to him where, what weird framing around EWC? People don't know because it was taken on the angle of like, look at their viewership, sports washing failed. It's like, bro, it's not really a flex to go, hey, Saudis, you just did your first ever event, a 4-day event with no advertising from Riot at all, not even in the client. And you only got the viewership of MSI 2018. It's like, bro, am I taking the crazy pulls? When I read that, I was like, mate, you're actually inadvertently saying they sort of killed it in their first outing. Like, if anything, I would have thought the viewership would be even less, because one thing people might not know about third-party tournaments as they were, I can tell you, Nymaera, in Counter-Strike, you can even take an amazing one like ESL, like Katowice, IM Katowice, IM Cologne in Counter-Strike. And even though the event, by the way, is actually better than the major in Counter-Strike, like the teams are all good, the format's way better, it'll never get close to the viewership of a major, because the major's the major, it's in the game, everyone knows, like the whole universe, everyone who plays the game knows that. So I just thought, like, in general, that was a bit weird. So, obviously, you haven't had a week off. You've still been working. By the way, if people don't know, your brother was actually at the EWC. He was even working the event, right? So,
yeah, he was,
you've been watching some LPL. You've obviously been enjoying EWC, right?
Yeah, I caught up on the highlights of the EWC because obviously LPL was there, same time, all the time. It's
never ends, does it?
It's going back to like 3 series a day again.
Oh, Lord.
So that's going to be for EU. So I have already cast about 330 games this year. So which is like, I mean, how many? We're like 200 and something days in. Yeah. I've cast like over a game and a half a day. I don't really stop. I just kind of keep going with that. So I
obviously all Valorant pros watching it just like. Yeah, that's like their entire career, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think on average, most major region casters do about 150
sounds about right.
a year. So I've probably done about double that already, and I've still got a half a split to go. So like, I've caught up on the highlights, particularly for like, the teams we're going to be talking about today and whatever. But
okay.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes through to like the viewership for this, given that there was no in-client representation, which there's no like big advertisement. I'm somewhat surprised it hit the numbers it did. I think the co-streamers was a really big win for them in terms of getting people like Tyler One.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because they got about 30k a pop, which is pretty good for at least letting people that it knows. You have basically, if you look on Twitch trending, it ended up being the first couple of rows from different audience co-streamers. So they ended up getting some pretty big numbers through that. So I didn't know exactly how it would be received because, there was every chance that Tier 1 got knocked out in first round.
I think the results also helped.
Yeah, particularly that you ended up having, Tier 1 versus big good teams. So they were good games involving the most popular team in the world. It ended up really boosting viewership like that. And you can just, keep putting all the pictures of the T1 players over. I mean, the thing with the T1's popularity is insane because effectively they have made T1's team into K-pop stars. If you look at the way they market them, it is effectively K-popism, which in fairness is a great way to market them if you want to get return on investment.
Yeah, of course.
It is, and it's worked really well for them. But the fact that you can then latch that onto any tournament, if you get T1 at your event, you have an event. I think that's what we've learned from this.
No, I would agree. It's actually one of the reasons why, even though Monty, no one liked it because unfortunately, as soon as you say Super League, they think of that football Super League, and every fan is like, "You're destroying the game I love." So everyone by default is against the concept of the Super League.
One, right? Yeah.
But the reason why Monty always suggested it is exactly because of reasons like that. Like the joke is, even though Gen G is a way better team than T1 overall, they don't have the same fan base and legacy though. Like I agree with you. If I was putting on a new event and I was some sort of third party, and it was possible, obviously wasn't recently. If it was possible, like EWC, to invite T1, the joke is you'd do it even if they were the 4th best team. It's not really, they don't really have to be the best Korean team. Because I'm with you, them and Faker just bring the viewership. It's obvious.
It's like, God, it reminds me even of, was it All-Star 2014? Well, 10 bloody years ago. All-Star 2014, when SKT was invited to All-Star. They weren't the best team in Korea
they weren't.
at that point.
I think they even came like 8th that split or something. Yeah.
That was like their worst split, like almost ever. But they were still the most entertaining team at the event, and they had this huge brand for it. So I mean, that's apparently just how you run new events. I think particularly because in esports you don't have as much geolocation based. I mean, the only teams you can really think about that for maybe like Loud and Karmine
of course.
Core and a couple of things like that. You don't have that many like location based fan bases like that. So you want to just global and you just get them everywhere. And you just invite the teams which can carry your event. I think we've learned a lot about that.
So I thought what we could do is, normally on this show, I do a mixture of sort of like almost like a check the pulse and the temperature of each of the teams, and then you do a bit of sort of like trajectory. So for example, if I ever talk about Fnatic, we don't usually just talk about their week 1 results. It's like with a view to, can they topple G2? Can they win? It's always tied into the narrative. But I thought this is actually a rare time because we had a true week off. It wasn't just a break to go into the playoffs. I thought actually we could just start by doing it initially based on the upper bracket matchups, and then we'll, look at the trajectories of the teams, because I also think one of the interesting things about these matchups is, on paper, I think they look very one-sided, but I'm actually interested to see where you want to go on that one. So we'll just start in order. So the most interesting one on paper, in theory, is SK against Heretics, right? The interesting thing about this for me is, SK obviously is kind of like, they're like this splits Fnatic. They're the team that's looking way better than you expect. Maybe they're actually for real this time. Wow, are they actually going to win? They've even got an all-Korean bot lane that works too, doesn't it? They've got a sort of up and down mid laner from Europe who's one shot. The narratives are all working, boys. They're all cooking wool over time here. But when they face Team Heretics, I'm pretty sure fans are just going to go because of the first weeks or two. Like, well, this is an easy 2-0. Heretics sucks, because Heretics has that problem I always say, which is like, it's like a team where no player's bad, but it's like, but you haven't got the players to build around. You've got all the pieces that go around the staff. You know what I mean? Like the joke is, you can see why Perks wanted to. Yeah, you can see why Perks wanted to be in this team, because in that analogy, he was going to be the chocolate flake, wasn't he? And now all they've got is just like a nice, it's not melting. It's still all right, but it's just vanilla ice cream in it. So, what are your thoughts? Is this as obvious as a fan will think? Do you think there's some play to be had here?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the matchups in this round are pretty one-sided, and I guess it's better to get them out of the way early to get the better matchups later. I mean, if you're going to have them early instead of in the important matchups. I think there are some angles of attack for Heretics, but it really depends if they've kind of figured out their own foibles and their own strengths, because I hate Heretics when they play around Jankos having AP carries. It's not what he wants to do. He's never been an AP static carry player. His Karthus gameplay wasn't it. But then he switched over to Sejuani, and as a couple of people found out recently, he knows Sejuani quite well, and he knows all the intricacies of it quite well. He knows how to pull the trigger. I think.
By the way, on that particular topic, it's neither really here nor there, or if people were wrong. You know this when you stream. Anyone could say anything. I actually thought the more impressive thing, which I think Jankos was doing as well, guys, there's a million times I'm sure he thought about calling out a caster, but it was really tenuous. What he was also low-key doing there, like you say, is he was flexing that he's a mega expert on how Sejuani works. And by the way, that he sold it. He fucking sold it, didn't he? Yeah, he sold it like a motherfucker.
Yeah, no. And the thing is that he also ended up getting, like, tagging a load of big figures so it goes onto all the right... This is like social media. It's like,
this guy knows what he's doing, right.
It's just like top couple of posts of Reddit, massive on Twitter, and it's like, credit to it. Dom sat there and
he killed it.
I mean, fair fucking play. He called out the mechanics. I mean, once you're in that position, the worst thing you can do as someone called out is double down when you are obviously wrong. Just take the L. I think that's something which a lot of analysts have not learned to do, because there's a real sense of pride about mechanics in like League. It's like, just if they say it's right, learn from it, move on. Next time you'll know what happens. I mean, you don't see that much though. A lot of players don't really delve into it, which is, it's fair. You get it. If you call out everything, you are going to be stuck there for a million years. So hey, whatever. That was a good one though.
Right, what about, in what way what type of Heretics do we need to see to give SK gear?
Yeah. So back to the matchup. I think Jankos, when he has a go button and he can kind of like get these really quick picks where you can go forward with the Sejuani ult, catch someone out of position, that empowers Heretics to have, that ability for all of these pieces which go around the central piece to just kind of flow into a fight quite naturally. I think it ends up giving, Trimby a much easier job too, who's had bit of an up and down split, but I think when he can kind of like follow Jankos into the play, it makes things a lot easier, because I think when Jankos gets the go button, he has a very clear identity of how to play the game, and it allows everyone to go beyond that. I think Wonders are much better form to allow to that. But the most important fact for me, when it comes to particularly that front, is that I think the weak point of SK is Isma, and I think Isma has also acknowledged that when it comes to his own interviews too, when he's saying like, look, I'm not playing very well. I think that becomes quite visible when it comes down to The early game plans of SK have been all over the place. Now, Heretics didn't have the best ones at the start of the split, but they've at least improved in that. But you can see Isma dying in a handful of level 1s and early plays where he's misread something about his jungle clear or misread the support he has from his teammates and stuff. I think if GiantX can get under Isma's skin, have a go button, and force SK to play around a jungler who is constantly on catch-up, there is a chance there. I still think even with that, it's probably SK favored, but I think it would make it a much closer series, and this is a best of 3, so I think that could potentially lead to a 2-1, maybe if Isma doesn't get off to the right start, and that kind of flows out onto the rest of the map where GiantX is just continually keeping people back. My worry is you need to keep SK down enough so their aggressive pieces don't get those good angles themselves. I think that Irrelevant as a teamfight top laner probably has the best teamfight instincts of any top laner outside of, I don't know, maybe Broken Blade. I think Adam's also up there too, but at least he's in the conversation. Sure. I think Irrelevant's had an incredible year, and I think we are. Luckily, the community is really coming around to talking about Irrelevant as a genuinely top tier European top laner. It was really quite annoying for a while when he was doing great work, and no one was talking about him. At least we've got to that point now.
He's finally got to that status where, because everyone says he's underrated, that means he's actually now appropriately rated, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, look, this guy's a good top laner. Yes. I like what he's doing. I like what he's doing in team fights. I think SK had that one game versus Vitality. He is still kind of underrated in some senses, though, because that one game against Vitality where SK kind of clutched it out after throwing it. Everyone's talking, oh, Niski shuffle was great. Niski saved players. Irrelevant triple stunned them just before that to allow him to do that. By the way, Irrelevant saves that game, and then Niski cleans up. It's a two-person affair, but you don't do that without Irrelevant. So if you don't kind of shut down Isma, kind of going back to like what GiantX can kind of provide to this matchup, if you don't shut down Isma, and he's kind of like allowed to again just give a safe bubble to Irrelevant, and have Niski kind of roaming to help him in that too, I think Irrelevant becomes a big issue, because I think that Wunder's pretty okay at playing his bruiser types and whatever. I don't think he's going to deal particularly well with an Irrelevant Camille in a good matchup. I think that could be a bit of a killer. And I think also as well, if you're not great at forcing plays, you give aggressive room to Rahel as well. And I think that is where this team has really shined. I think I have some credit for SK in keeping Exakick and DOS for a while, just because I hate when players get brought in for like one split. They don't really get to stabilize, and they just kind of just get thrown out into the junkyard, and they never get brought up to the LEC. They kept Exakick and DOS for a while. I think we saw the natural end of what that duo could bring to this team as soon as the Lucian Nami and the Zeri Yuumi kind of fell off. They didn't really slot back into the meta again. Bringing in this bot lane has really, really helped this team, because I think Rahel has been a really good aggressive AD carry when he has room to go forward on Kai'Sa or whatever dash champion he's using. This guy is really, really good. I think I'd also echo something which Swiffer said, which is in regards to not all of the Korean imports in LEC are the same. I think if you compare Noah, Ice, and Rahel, they are actually very, very different. They're not just plug and play, oh, it's just some LCK Challenger AD carry. Rahel's been really, really good at just kind of like using that kind of dead space where people aren't really pressuring or pulling the trigger to then find his own play to go forwards in. And I think that's something that Exakick and DOS really struggled to do after a while. So I think that SK, if you hold them back and you continually punish them and not giving them that dead zone where Rahel can find that aggressive play, I think that there is some option to move forward with this. I think it does require GiantX and Trimi to be really, really snappy, continually finding engages. If they do give them breathing room, I've got a lot of worries for them. At least we have seen a blueprint of how to occasionally get under their skin. I think that Vitality game was actually a really good example of how to get under SK's skin, where there was a period where I think Rahel dies in mid lane 2 or 3 times back to back when they're in a 1-3-1. 1-3-1 is a really hard style to work with. But if you're sat in mid lane as an AD carry, your job is not to be aggressive as the AD carry, it's to be safe as an AD carry. And I think Rahel, we saw maybe there's one of the foibles which is yet to be exploited as much, and maybe we'll see that later on into playoffs. Where if you just continually snap engage onto Rahel from jungle and support from the Fog of War either side of mid, maybe there's options there too. Even with all this said and done, this is on like a peak, engaging all the time, GiantX and Trimby. I don't think we're going to get that for a full best of 3. I think you're going to give them breathing room, and I think SK have really good clutch playmakers now, which they weirdly didn't have before this. I think that Rahel and oh god, who's the support?
Kale or whatever, something in it.
Yeah.
Is that what his name is?
Luan. That's
sorry, yeah.
Luan, yeah. I was there was like, Rahel's just like the name which I was talking about so much in my head before I came on this, because, again, he's just a really interesting player to watch. I love watching him play aggressively. But if you end up kind of like winning over the jungle support matchup and just get into that Fog of War and just start engaging onto Rahel out of it, I think maybe you can get under SK's skin. That's best case scenario. I don't think you're going to get that for a full best of 3, so I'm still favoring SK when it comes to that.
Yeah, on a few of those points, like, I'm actually with you. The most obvious logical place that you can win this game if you're Heretics is jungle and support. Those are your two players who probably are still among the best. Obviously, they have fantastic history going back. And in contrast, that's where some of the weaknesses for SK are. That's where their inexperienced players are. It's also mad, by the way, that I actually said Kale there because that's the only one Legends player. But whatever. It just shows how when names are on you, it is still a Korean support player, though. It is. That's why you know it's in my brain. So it's all good. And also, I'll tie it into my analysis. When they first added this bot lane, I was like, is the reason they've added both of them? Like, are they going to like work together? This bot lane is just the fucking Rahel guy. That's the fucking sick player here. Like, he's the obvious star. And also, I think that's why SK is like, I think they're the truth, mate. Like, I actually do think they will have a real chance to mix it up with the Fnatic and BDSs, and there's an outside shot. They could be in the final. I can go to Worlds. They can do it all.
I think that the one thing which I need to see is that if they're pressured in that 1-3-1 setup again and Rahel doesn't get that option to play aggressively, what's the fallback? Because I think last time I was on this show, one of my big things about the entire league, realistically, is that when plan A goes wrong for most of your mid-table and bot-table teams, things fall apart very quickly. I think SK were the most visible team of that, where like something would go wrong and then suddenly everyone's like, Niski's flashing over Wolf Pit and dying randomly in late game because no one knows what the plan is beyond that point. I think Rahel and Luon, when they get to play aggressively, they can be a fallback plan where it's like, well, I don't know what's happening with the macro, but let's go for a 2v2 kill or something like that.
Yes.
So if they're shut down, I wonder whether that kind of becomes a problem again, where again, the plan A fails and then you've kind of cut down these extra options they have. That's like the one holdback I have. I think teams like BDS and G2, they will be able to punish them in side lanes at points, but it's just a question of how consistently they can do it and whether SK evolved throughout the playoffs on that, for me anyway.
Because I'm with you as well. I would love, if it was another team, I'd do the wonder angle and be like, hey, you know what, he's still capable. He can have a game or two. But the problem is, if it's anyone who's almost tailor-built to just survive that, it's irrelevant. He's just a better player in all regards right now at top lane. So I do think, essentially, you just need this has to be like a masterpiece from the jungle support. If they can do that, there's something. But I still favour SK. By the way, I like the point you said as well, where if you take those 3 Korean ADCs, they don't have any similarities. Like, Ice essentially is the stat stick, but he's done a dynamite job and he could play either style there. Nor, if anything's probably too passive. And the joke is he is like some Korean reckless or something mad. If any, that's why it's even perfect. He shit talked me, so he gets to go into that category of the permanent target on his back. And then I agree, like the Rahel guy is like, this guy actually, by the way, players like this, I think actually Noah's a bit more in the vein of like, I understand why people whine and like, just promoted ERL ADC. Ice and fucking Rahel, they're better than most of even the LEC players, mate. Like, I actually think in their own way, like, I think Rahel's exactly what you dream of in an ADC. You get him.
He's game-changing.
He's good at laning. He's good at fighting, mate. And as you say, he takes agency. Like, he actually understands, like, it points in the game, he can do things. Like, it's clear that someone isn't shot call, like, telling him to do that. He's seeing that angle and he's going for it. So, I think he's actually the one where, I mean, people have made this point before, but he probably, if SK does well, he should be an MVP candidate this season. Like, he's looked like he's transformed the whole team. And not least because, if anything, the big narrative on SK was the whole exit kick thing. Like, a guy had a really high ceiling, but he also had a really low floor. He could also get caught all over the place. I think essentially what's amazing is, you could never guess this, but you've kind of just done a pure upgrade. This just looks a lot better. Like, I'll tie into what you said before. I do still think, by the way, that there has got to be at least one LEC team can take a chance on Execute. He clearly has talent. If you mould him right, he could be a good player. The difference is, though, like, this was the right move. They nailed it. It was a ballsy move because a lot of people probably thought you'll be shit, but hey, whoever did the scouting killed it. I mean, I think it's like Crepe or whatever over there. Tell you what, they've got a fucking eye for the game, mate. These are good signings.
Yeah, usually so. I mean, God, the problem with the LEC talent pool question is a really intricate one now, because there are a lot of AD carries out in the cold. Because, I mean, Unforgiven doesn't have a team right now. That guy's great. How the hell is he around there? And,
Smart, isn't it?
Neon as well, and a couple of other players. It's a really weird situation. I'd even be willing to give another chance
Crowny,
to Jack Spectre, even though
Jack Spectre, there's loads.
There's a lot of AD carries just kind of randomly out there. And
by the way, the sad one is Jack Spectre, because I think they're doing that thing with him where they're like, he's been in LEC. It's like, yeah, but in the meantime, he's been cooking. Have you not been watching? The guy was cooking on those teams at ERL.
I also have a soft spot for X-Matty as well, because he had like the worst possible situation for BDS.
It was on the bad BDS, of course.
That was like on the awful BDS, and he also had a bad split. But like, you look at him in ERL, same kind of thing as Jack Spectre. It's just, you look at these players in that situation, you just think, If only they'd been put into like one of the cushy teams.
Yes.
What if you were like a Noah on Fnatic, where actually the whole team's giving you good stuff? I mean, obviously the great example of that is someone like Cream on top esports, where you have like 4 of the most veteran players around you in the world. And it's like, look, even if you do shit, the team's probably going to do fine. You at least get to play from a winning scenario.
Yes.
What the hell do you do with like that BDS team or like Jack Spectre on that, that first Heretics iteration, which was just destined to lose? It's a sad situation, and now you've got a load of AD carries that's out there in the cold, and there's a whole bunch of them where if they genuinely wanted to push to come back, would make things very, very interesting. I think that LEC AD carries a couple of years ago would have been one of their strongest roles. I don't know where I put it right now. I haven't really thought that through, but with people like Rahel, Ice, and I think, Noah for an LEC standard has been, fine. He's been good, and he's been stable enough, I guess. But there's a whole lot of AD carries out in the cold right now that could really switch things back up, and Rahel has actually gone above that. Credit to them. I think he would have been a better import than a lot of the ERL players that have come in. So whoever scouted that out, congrats to you. This has genuinely changed the team. He's a game-changing player the way that he works.
Yes. And I also, similarly, I give similar credit to how BDS found Ice. Like, I was thinking,
true.
You've blown it. Again, that's the guy your whole team's based around crowd shot. Like, if anything, if it doesn't work with him, just make it work, But instead, they went and did it. And what so impressed me about that was they did play to Adam first, and then they eventually just played the crowd shot style, but without crowd shot's ego. And apparently, it just works. So whoever's doing the scouting, this is why, even though in general, I do agree with the people who say, if you've got all that ERL talent, let's promote some of these guys and see if they're good. But if someone has the right scouting, and if people don't know, in the modern day, some people even have those like apps that are actually probably really good, the analyzers that show you like the damage they're doing. There's a few players that have come from that are legit, like actually are good, Maybe it doesn't work every time, but sometimes I think it's worth the gamble.
I'm pretty sure Peach was shown as
unfortunately, when you say it, people will always list like 2 or 3 really good ones, and then they do go, but Peach was also like number 1 or whatever. Like, so it's not a perfect formula. There's flaws in it. We can tweak it still. We can still upgrade.
The thing is, if it can point you in the right direction, hopefully it can make a short list of people to look at. This thing is most of the time when it comes to analytical tools, and I have to say I've watched quite a lot of analysts work at different points now, and the thing for me is like, can you use these tools to give you something which is much more easily communicable, and where it's just, this is just your jumping off point? I've seen people have like...
Well, you're still going to make the choice with the eye test, obviously. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, like, so for instance, I remember watching a couple of ERL analysts a couple of years ago now, like 2022 or so, like find analytical tools, or rather make them to find out level 1 heat maps, to say, okay, well, when this mid lane is on red side, they stand over this wall and they put a ward here, so you can maybe use a Rakan W to go over the wall and catch them and get their flash for free. That's the kind of thing which is kind of fun, but like, there still has to be like some user input at the end of this. It isn't doing your job for you. And I mean, scouting is never going to be completely automated, because there's so many different variables in League. You're never realistically going to get it off of just some data input.
Yes. Like, I would say on the Peach angle, just look at who they recruited who wasn't Korean. I'm just going to guess that GM didn't do a great job. Like, it's the obvious one, isn't it? Or the dreaded Rogue, the obvious other team that everyone hates. This show is brought to you by ExpressVPN. And you know what might seem unfair sometimes is that technically, depending on where you live in the world, you're actually only allowed to see certain content if you use, Netflix, BBC iPlayer, etc. By the way, as a Brit who lives abroad, I can tell you absolutely that's one of the things you miss when you go away. So you can't fire that up. It's when your friends go, hey, check out the matches on this. You're like, I'm not there right now. So there's all those different apps, and if people don't know, classically with things like Netflix, famously, it's also literally based on your region, not just if you have access to the service. So what might seem unfair is if you live in certain random country, I don't know, Romania, and the US has like an exclusive that you just don't get it. Like, it's not on yours. But if you were to use this sponsor here and support us, expressvpn.com/league show, you will not only get an extra 3 months. I've just shown there actually my own geolocation concept. Shout out to anyone who's seen the movie Inglourious Bastards. Not a bad reference. I do this for a living, right? So that instead of that or whatever it was, shout out Michael Fassbender. And basically, you will not only get 3 additional months for free, but then what would happen is if you were on one of those services and then you click that button, by the way, it's incredibly easy to use. It really is just one where you pick the location, press the big red button, and it just comes on. It's not one of those complicated ones. You don't have to be like a tech wizard with some like command prompts. Super easy, big button, you press it. You will see actually in real time, it will change to the location and you will see different content come up depending on what's on there. Because as I always say, technically your internet connection will be in that region. So totally fine for you. As I say, I actually think it's an area where people might not realise there's not any kind of moral qualm there. It was always based on where your internet connection was based technically anyway, because they don't phone you up and go, you are in America. Like, they just check where your internet's coming from. So obviously the thing about VPNs is They hide your location, etc. They hide like information about you behind the scenes. They encrypt their data because it goes through another tunnel instead of just coming straight out your connection into all the services, etc. So there's an added layer of protection and abstraction for you. They have servers in like 100 countries or something. So pretty much wherever you are, there'll be one that's close to you. That'll mean you get good ping and connectivity and all that jazz. Also, as I say, it works on loads of the streaming services, all the big ones you can think of. Certain one with a mouse that has black ears, the BBC one. You can guess all the others. You know all the others. I don't know which ones people won't mention, so I'm keeping it coy here a little bit. Obviously, like I say, it's super easy to use. By the way, it works on loads of devices as well. It's not just something for your PC. You can have it on your phone. You can have it on tablet, laptop, whatever. TV, smart TVs is obviously one in the Monday. I don't do that as much myself, but if you have a smart TV and you've got internet enabled, you can also just set it up on there. It's really easy to use. I think people don't think of that one, actually. It doesn't have to be on your PC. You do this. So yeah, super easy. So the smart move and the way to get more out of your internet viewing experience is to use expressvpn.com/league show and get those 3 months free additionally. Enjoy the content. Now we will get incredibly geolocated and only talk about LEC.
So funnily enough, when it comes to the Netflix thing, I was trying to watch Taskmaster recently, which is a fantastic British comedy when it comes to. I can't find it in Berlin, so I don't get access to that. Well, luckily they have it on YouTube, but I'm sat there like I would like to watch XYZ things in terms of British comedy there. And they're also, I'm pretty sure I used that to work last summer Chinese LPL finals as well.
It's usually what everyone uses when they go there.
Yeah, like you have to have something to reach the stats websites you normally have. So yeah, it's a good one.
I also agree, by the way, that's probably the most frustrating thing to me, is when it's like, look, in the modern day, if you gave an option, I'd pay for it too. But like, it's like that Fry meme, like, please take my money. Like, I want to, I just want to see BBC iPlayer, please. You know what I mean? Like, if you had an option, I'd even pay like the expat fee and just put €5 on or something, you know.
It was something like Godzilla -1, which I watched that. I ended up finally getting to watch everything because they did re-release it again. But for a while, there was no legal way to watch it because they just couldn't get the licensing stuff out there too. So you sat there just like, okay, where can I watch the thing which I would pay money to watch? How do I get that? Oh, God. Modern phenomena.
Right, let's do another matchup then.
Right.
On paper, I'm supposed to believe Fnatic probably shouldn't even lose a game to GX. They should easily murk them, move past, blah, blah, blah. Right? Is there any hype? Do you have any reason to care about GX? Where are you at? Look, I'll say the one good thing about them is they're not the worst team anymore because we've got much worse teams. But I don't know that means they got much better, if you know what I mean.
I think, look, GiantX for me, they're a team which I really struggle to find out their identity. So I just kind of burn my brain on them trying to figure out exactly what I can say about them. And I just can't sit there without that much to talk about because all of these players have had their ups and downs. And it really does feel like, the big thing you can take away from this is that, Juhan is not Peach. He is somewhat better. Is he special? No. Ignor's playing better than he was earlier in the year. Is he that great? Well, he has some games, but no, not really. Patrick's had some good performances. Antonio, credit to him, is better than I thought he would be, because I thought he'd be the worst top laner in the league. He's at least had some teamfight impact, and he's a fairly untiltable guy. So
the good news for him is he definitely knows what his job is, Nymaera, and everyone in the team does. So that could be a good thing. I'll raise the floor a bit.
Yeah, and I think that allows them to have some teamfight impacts. I've liked some of their games where they kind of like just to pile onto a side lane with double teleports and they work through that. And that's led to some mid-game skirmishes that worked out for them. The big thing about this team is Jackie's just being really good in his laning phase and finding carries which are suitable for the meta and playing them out well. I think he's the only player I want to see play Varus mid. Like, I saw Humanoid play that shit, and it was not good. Like, his positioning's down, his laning's down, he knows how to control the mid and late game with it, so GiantX at least have like a real star player in Jackie's playing through that mid lane. And again, he's really glowed up from spring to summer. Imagine if they dumped him after one split. That would have been a real tragedy. Yeah. So I'm glad that they stuck with him, and that's not someone who's just been thrown onto the the ERL recycling pit. So then GiantX, I don't think they've necessarily forged themselves a solid identity, but they have enough pieces to at least improvise when it comes to the teleports and the globals and the teamfight impact. Antonio, again, knows what his job is. To play a long-range engaged champion, hover around where the play is going to be made, eventually have a teamfight impact. It's not really as bespoke as a lot of other teams, but it's enough to catch sleeping teams when they slip. And I think it's enough to catch them when they're not great at pressing down on the important points too. So then we have to bring that into perspective of Fnatic. I don't know what the hell has gone on with Fnatic, but this team has nosedived. Like, utterly nosedived.
Oh, that year's WC was really depressing, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, well, even just before that in LEC, they were showing some real signs of real questionable moments. I think that we were praising Humanoid for having really strong regular splits throughout most of this year. It's not happened now. And I think his EWC was also really suspect. Garbage, to the point where the BDS game was arguably on him jumping forward Corki into the Talir
yeah.
and just like randomly dying in lane. For the record, I think that Corki, Tristana are like utterly broken ass champions right now. And I mean, like most regions have found that out. But I think in LEC, like a lot of the time, you see the AD carry player of that matchup just making some boneheaded mistake and then getting punished for it. And the fact that he got kind of like Talir shoved under turret, gave up that solo kill, which gave up the objectives afterwards, which then snowballed the game into BDS's favor. Like, we just don't expect that of Humanoid because his laning has normally been super solid. The big problem for me is Humanoid's team fighting has also been really off. He's been historically, very good at a mobile mages. I've enjoyed watching his Orianna before. I think his Sway's been really good in the past too. But his Sway recently has been like walking into melee range of a jungler to try and fire a skill shot beyond them. Like, what is up with that? Like, that's just not how you play the champion. Hui's a kind of champion which can just take over a game at 2 items, regardless if you're 3,000 gold down. The fact that Humanoid was playing some games like that was really weird.
I mean, put it this way, if someone wants a reference point, just fire up like a rookie Hui or a Chovy Hui, and you will see there are levels to this shit. Like, they'll make it look broken shit,
Yeah, I know this champion is like not fair when he gets like 2-3 really. And the fact that he has not been carrying in the way that he wanted to is a big problem. I think that he's been picking some random champions. He played a Cassidy mid at EWC as well, which was just not the right place for it, and that just didn't look. I know it's the Fnatic Cassidy thing. You can call back to the X packet all you want. It's not the same champion now. So that's a problem because Fnatic have forever been a team where, like, it's really hard to suss out the systems they have in place because largely Fnatic are a team which is floated on, is Razork having a good game, is Humanoid having a good game. If Humanoid's off, it puts the pressure elsewhere. I think the problem right now is that we're having, another downturn split for Oscar Rinnan. I think Oscar Rinnan's laning phase has been bit all over the place. He's had some okay games. I think against G2, he really turned it on. He had a really good game versus G2, but then after that point, I think his laning phase has been a lot more suspect. I think he's been overdiving quite a lot. Noah, he's been playing more aggressively than he was in earlier parts of the year. I still think that he's over. I think now that the problem is he's overplaying when he's going aggressive. There are points where, one of the games he like dove under turret and like ended up in mid lane, and he ends up kind of like tanking turret shots in this big team fight. Somehow he grabbed tower aggro, then they have to retreat because the AD carries in like a 3rd HP, and he hasn't played that out very well. His EWC was, again, a little bit of the overplaying. It does feel like he's trying to make himself into a more aggressive player, but he's just not threading the needle effectively in those team fights. So that comes down to the question of, is it better to be passive or proactive but bad? Like, which one do you want to take at that point? Sadly, Rogue had that conundrum this split as well, where it's like you got to pick one of them. But when Humanoid is off, and he very much has been in this split, it puts the pressure elsewhere. And I think Oscar Rinnan's not necessarily been playing that well. I think that Noah's not been playing that well. Razork's been playing okay to good. He's had some duff games as well. So the individual levels aren't great. I think they're kind of like the polar opposite of a team like BDS, where even when a player is not necessarily on the best form, their systems and their organizational play will carry them through it. So I think Fnatic in a lot of ways it's not quite accurate to say the anti-BDS because BDS do have clutch players too. But if you're talking about their main selling points, BDS are very, very organized, and they play through, understanding everyone's role within the team. Fnatic play through just like, let's see if someone can outplay. I think also that has fled. This is now filtered through Fnatic's gameplay in regards to their laning phase has been really awkward. They've been losing a lot of 2v2s in bot side. They've been losing solo kills in mid lane as well. Oscar Rinnan's also not been in a great spot, where they don't have the leads they need to take the skirmishes with. And it often means they end up biting off way more than they can chew. And this becomes very, very apparent. I have noticed Fnatic, their worst enemy is globals right now. And the problem is there are 1 million globals in the game. There's 1 million Talirs. There are like 3 teleports in each team per game right now. So if you're already, if you picture this scenario, you've lost a 2v2 to bot, you're 10 CS down in mid lane, and you're playing a little bit further back in lane. When you jump forward into river for a pick, you try and pick off that first target, who's maybe a tanky jungler or a tanky top laner. You take longer to get to that kill than you should be doing based on your scrims or how you were playing before. Because you're taking another 3, 4, 5 seconds to kill that target, Talir is now in the play, teleports have now come in, and you have now gotten yourself into an outnumbered scenario because you haven't called those same teleports, you're behind on the map, and you fall behind. And that's really what we've been saying recently from Fnatic, which is a bit sad because I feel like Fnatic are pretty good at improvising when they have tools. They're one of the better teams at just saying like, they normally have good ward coverage. They've normally been better at side laning and laning than a lot of their opponents, and they're pretty good at just kind of like improvising with the tools they have to make sure those plays happen in their favor instead. Where actually when a pick happens, they have the extra globals coming in. They have the extra members of the play. They're picking off the target in time. And also another skill set which they have, which I typically like about Fnatic, is that when they win plays on actually regardless of where they win plays on one side of the map, one thing which I think European teams are really bad at is that when you are playing to one side of the map, make sure you drop some of those odd wards, so if you go for a second play on that side of the map, you go back there. I don't want to see like another like Mad Lions game or Vitality game where like they play towards one side of the map and they don't realize that wards are there, because obviously there were 5 enemy players in their own jungle. Of course there's going to be at least one ward there. I've seen this the world over from teams which are in like mid to bottom teams. Fnatic have typically been better at that, but they can't even show that right now because they're getting pushed back so early into the game. So when it comes, bring it back to the GiantX matchup, I think as it stands, GiantX is still not quite strong enough in lane and top and bot for me to like say it's going to be an absolute blowout there or whatever. I think it will be more contested given the current form of Fnatic, but I think Jackies might be able to pin back Humanoid to the point where maybe Humanoid is slower to the play, and maybe that means they can have they can lean into some of the weaknesses of Fnatic. Still think as it stands, Fnatic just pound for pound are going to have an easier time versus GiantX. I mean, that's just the nature of having a higher seed versus a lower seed. But on current form, this is probably the best chance one of our lower table teams is going to have to beat Fnatic before they figure their laning shit out, really.
Yes, I'm actually glad you set it up that way, because I was going to say I think this is the one that on paper looks, because everyone gave up. Like even the fact they rebranded is perfect, because everyone looks at the name GiantX. It's never been good, so they just don't give a fuck. They just, like I said, they already actually expect them to be with Rogue just at the bottom of the table. So if anything, they're already overperforming. I'm with you. The one factor that I actually think gives them a chance is, I agree on Fnatic, by the way. Fnatic, the joke is the team that was made for the original LCS broadcast format where you used to do it like American sports for like boomers, where you do the 3 keys to the game, you know, and the joke is it would be like Froggen can't get ahead and see it, you know, it'd be like the most obvious shit of all time. But as you said, the joke is the big picture things really are the keys to beat Fnatic. Like point number 1, top of the list is Razork playing really well? If he's not, you got a chance immediately. Like, this team lives off Razork's game. In fact, I'll agree with you on Oscarinin. I actually think he's somewhat living off his rep from last year at this point in time. Like, he's been way more sus this year, and for me, he's never been close to the best top laner, which, considering Fnatic's always in the mix, if he was good, he would be. Like, he'd be at that all LEC category. He's not anywhere close to me, and one of the problems is, I think he has, like, the best jungler in the fucking league. And it's not just the best jungler, it's not even like a cover jungler. He has the best aggressive, proactive jungler. That's the dream as a top laner. You're going to just get so many times, by the way, where you're essentially covered because he's just in the other guy's fucking jungle or doing a gank on mid and they have to cover that, you know. So that's already like a sort of fucking charmed life to live if you're Oscarinin. Then also, as well as you need Razork, you do need those pop-offs from Humanoid. Like, those are the games that keep making him think maybe he's got it together and he is motivated now. But as we've learned, Humanoid's just Humanoid. It's like, it's not even a coin. Yeah. He's like a fucking D20 from D&D or something. Like, you pick which numbers. If it lands on those numbers, he carries. If it lands on some others, it's up and down. If it lands on some, he does nothing and feeds and it dies 1v1 over and over again. In many ways, actually, his problems have always been the same his entire career. It just depends what teams are around him and how well do they fit him. So yeah, I actually think in this particular series, well, the one handy. There you go. The one big upside if you're GX is Jackies. Like, I actually have an interesting tangent I'll go on in a minute, get you in on, which goes like this. Before I get to that, I would just say their team clearly know, just like they know the Antonio is there to be like a fucking weak side tank in a team fight, they also clearly know our only route to victory is get Jackies on champions he can carry on and literally give everything to this motherfucker. Like, this is the one guy that can do it. And actually, that's where the Humanoid sort of like, did it land a 6, a 9, or a 20? That's where that becomes a big deal, because actually, I could easily, remember, this is best of 3. It's not a BO5. They can win one game just off Jackie's having a good game. If you have another one where Humanoid's a bit sus and he dies and Razork's a bit, suddenly you fluked the 2-1. You've got the BO3 win. It's not impossible. And with you, in general, I would still give it over. Like, one of the problems I have with GX always is their bottle is just a bit meh. It's not even bad. It's just meh. Like, as you say, Ignar's not the player he was in an RG. Patrick's still just Patrick. He's never bad, but he's not actually particularly great anymore. And I notice people don't even put his name in those conversations. The thing I wanted to go back on the Jackies one was, one of the only people I actually found who pushed back a little bit against the Jackies hype, because I'm like you. When he first came in the team in the winter, I was sort of like, why you recruit this guy? Like, he's just okay. Yeah, he's all right. Like, is this really the guy we're getting out of the RLs? I actually think this split, he's put his game on another level. Like, he had, by the way, almost every win they've had, he's just responsible for. If you go and watch it, he is the carry player. But I thought an interesting thing on last week's episode when I had Jensen Gore, who's more of like a systems guy breaking things down, is he actually is tempering his hype on Jackies a little bit because he thinks it's a little bit like when Vetio came up in Misfits. Right. And obviously the thing everyone's scared about with him now was it looks like even though he has talent, he's very idiosyncratic, and it was the system of how they played around him, actually, even though everyone flamed those players. They had the most cynical system in Misfits. Remember, like, Irrelevant was a permanent tank, Zanzara or whoever their job was just gank for fucking Vetio all day long in mid. Bot lane's job was basically like get to the late game, they had Neon, and then the joke was, I actually made this joke many times, but I think it's true. Mercer got like so many extra splits because his job was just be Yumi and attached to Vetio. And guess what? He did a fucking great job at that. Now, beyond that, playing support, I don't know. I was never that in on him. But I tell you what, whoever told him to do that, it fucking worked. So essentially, what he set up, Jensen, was he feels as though, like, Jackies does have talent, but he also does think it's not like he's like 1v9 and on a team that does nothing. He thinks he has a lot of, like, setup, and basically the whole team is giving him resources. What would you say to that?
Well, I think what I'd say to that is that if you don't play to your players' strengths, you're going to end up like Vitality.
True.
So you could have been out of playoffs because you didn't know how to, like, bend everyone into the same kind of position where you're playing towards Hylissang instead of towards Vito, and obviously that didn't. They lost that gamble heavily in that case. I'll also say in regards to that, I think Jackies, if you're comparing spring to summer, and now you're saying, well, he has these strengths that they're playing around. Well, I'm not even necessarily sure he had them in spring, so I think he's added them to his game. What's to say that, given that he's had such a short career, why can't he add more to that? Why can't he learn more from that?
Oh, he's also 19 as well. I've just looked it up. He's pretty young.
Yeah, he's young. He's only had a couple of splits in the LEC, and he has shown split-on-split growth. I need to see someone take him under his wing I need to see a good positional coach for him. If he has a good positional coach, I think this guy could go skyrocketing, because what you need to do, as opposed to Vito, which I think the real sad story with Vito, and I think maybe his time is done in the LEC now, is that he had these strengths. They were too conditional. They couldn't be unlocked in within every team. And if he wasn't away from them, his average level of play was not standard towards the LEC. And it became a problem where he couldn't roam out of lane and affect his team. As long as the team is playing to set up Jackies, you don't really have to worry about the other styles of his game. Because let's be honest, as it stands, Antonio's not going to be a carry. Patrick's not going to be a hyper carry in the way that he was in some XL lineups like that too. By process elimination, it has to really go towards mid lane, particularly since EU has not really played towards carry junglers as well as... I mean, obviously, I've cast 300 LPL games. We play frickin' carry junglers every single game. We know exactly how that is. But if you're not playing towards that, then it has to go towards the mid lane. So, for me, given that they were expected to be bottom 2, bottom 3, the fact that they're here and the fact that they did it largely through Jackies and his performance as well, and then having everyone kind of facilitate that, Antonio's teamfight impact has been a lot better than I thought it would be. I think that same kind of thing with Juhan and as well. They are using the pieces they have well. Now, if this becomes now, I think this conversation becomes very relevant if Jackies then goes onto a different team, a different roster, or it's a different meta where he can't play the style. That's when I think this is relevant. I'm not going to discredit those points. If it does become the case where he only has these strengths, then yes, obviously that means that he's maybe not as well-rounded a player. I want to see what he does to grow through this. I want to see what he can do to, what happens if he starts playing more strongly towards side lanes. What happens if he becomes more of a facilitative player, if jungle carries do need to come onto the table or something like that. Then we'll start seeing that come to the fore. But as long as they're playing towards him in this current style right now, one, I think it's the best use of the pieces that they have. I don't think they're capping themselves by doing this. And yeah, that does mean that you don't get to see maybe the lacking aspects of his play. So that's kind of like acknowledge, not relevant for now.
Okay. And by the way, I'm with you as well. I actually think this guy's champion pool is really fun.
It's
very entertaining player to watch.
Call it out, but yeah.
I've got a question for you. One thing when you were referencing earlier about how Fnatic plays, that's another part I noticed analysts always tunnel on, but fans never mention, which is one of the reasons why, for example, I always say I also know because I know some of the coaches, so I can cheat like that, but I know from watching as well that BDS is really well coached. It's because one of the areas you see it is when they have to play on multiple lanes, etc. Like, it's not a solo queue game where they're like, come mate, like they clearly understand like the protocols and the flow chart of what to do. But actually, as you were saying there, that is one of those things that I think is underrated, Nymaera. Because what I would say is this: it's not a concept you learn once and then you can just apply every time. It's clearly something you practice and go over and run review. So every season, obviously, depending on what the comps are, it changes, like which champion you're going to assign to which lane, which you're going to push on, what the timing dynamic's going to be, when you're going to tell someone, like you say, hold mid, as opposed to you can push and fight if you want and we'll join you. Because by the way, on the Rahel guy one, the obvious angle for SK is maybe his English isn't that great in that moment, or maybe he can't communicate instantly when people are come in the same way when he's on mid-wave, you know. So what would you say to that? Because I do think that's one area where you can always see the teams that have the comfort playing on multiple lanes, and then you can always see the ones where they almost have to use like the Riot, Fisher-Price, end the game, just win off Baron fight and push up mid. Like, I can really see the teams that don't get it, if you know what I mean.
Well, I think 1-3-1 is the hardest styles of League of Legends to play. It was an EU specialty.
It was the shit,
So a lot of people think of G2 2019. G2 2018 was a fantastic 1-3-1 comp. Where Wonder playing the Camille, and like they had this timing down pat where it's like, if Camille's on an inhib turret, it will be 30 seconds till Nexus is killed if you allow them at a certain point against it, blah, 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 stuff like that. So 1-3-1 is obviously a very difficult style to play. It does require a lot of moving parts, and I think that teams that are good at 1-3-1 obviously have something going for them when it comes to that, whether it's certain instincts and players which have champion pools which allow them to take over the map. God, there was another thing I was going to say to it too. And cross-mapping is the other one, which also comes into a big thing. You know, 1-3-1 is not the same as cross-mapping. You can have someone like in a 1-4 or big dives on either side. There aren't that many teams that are cross-mapping that well right now. The ones are really G2 and BDS. They're the ones which are there. And I think that really is, actually, when you come around to talking about BDS, I think one of the reasons why you can say this team is well coached. Yeah, there's a good time to go on to it. My favorite thing about BDS right now is that in the past, I thought BDS didn't know how to play around sidelines, and I don't think they did. And I think that was why we saw Adam play his champions the way he did, when you had the Olaf, the Darius, the Garen, the Gods champions, whatever it was. Set as well was the last one. Where effectively the game plan was, and this carried over from BDS Academy when they brought them up from there too, which is effectively, you don't need to learn how to play around side lanes when your top laner is playing something so obnoxious, you need to counter him with 3 people. It's not enough to 1v2. If he gets ahead, you need to bring 3 people. At that point, it doesn't matter if you know how to play side lanes or not. 3 people are already accounted for. Try to kill your Darius on the other side, because otherwise he'll solo kill your top laner.
By the way, in case people don't get what he means you've already won by drawing the pressure whether you die or not then. Yeah, that's actually a win on side lane. Yeah,
it's like, you know, it doesn't matter where it's like, oh, maybe we're going to push out this wave so we get a timing to go onto mid lane or whatever. It's like, no, you know people will have to go answer this obnoxious top laner because Adam's playing them. And you're free across the map because you're always going to have an extra person in that lane compared to where else it is. The fact that now, this split, BDS are playing stuff like the Gragas and they're playing towards the tank top lanes, and they are still winning through top lanes, shows me that they have evolved in terms of their side lane play. I think that Adam has had some fantastic Gragas games where he's just played like weak side on a side lane, wave clears, but knows how to enter into the team fights and play around them, and they can still play around, big engages from Labrov and from Sheo as well if he's on those kind of picks. I think this team has really leveled up in regards to that. I think that BDS might unironically be the best coached team in EU.
I think that's fair.
If you discount the fact that, you know, obviously G2 are above them in terms of play, I also think that their players have so many years of experience.
They have like a Man City squad of like all the best players. True.
Yeah, and they have a load of players which have had a load of experience playing this stuff. And I think G2 are fantastically coached. I think there is a contest between the two of them there. But I think BDS leveling up this group of players from where they were to where they are now, I think you have to praise that. Whenever I do see them kind of like playing around their side lanes and going into those big engages and kind of like splitting the map and their cross mapping, this team is really impressive to me. I think that BDS for me are clearly the second best team within the LEC if you're looking at the systems they put in place too. I think one of the other things which really interests me about BDS, which is kind of the opposite of I called out Jankos for not being very good at AP junglers earlier, and a lot of teams haven't been great at that. I don't think Sheo is a great AP jungler either, but I think BDS understands that role well enough to enable it so he gets an easier job. So there was a Karthus game or two where he had not great positioning and he ends up getting caught out. Doesn't matter, the team knows the role of it, and even if his positioning's not perfect and he doesn't know how to play the champion perfectly, he's still getting enough value out of it. And I think that's something, again, which I really like about BDS. When BDS brings something new to the Rift, you know that they're going to have good understanding of it. And I think they are probably the best organized unit in terms of their quick snap engages when they're all grouped up and like they're playing around those big plays. I think that BDS are for me probably second best team within Europe, and especially with Fnatic falling off. And I think particularly given SK's particular flaws, and when like maybe the 1-3-1's not so great for them, I think that BDS would have a really good matchup into them. So by kind of like referencing that, I would say that BDS for me are probably second best team, which makes it quite a sad matchup for Mad Koi, who are facing up against them, because they are not the most organized team. In fact, Mad have this really funny statistic. It's so funny to me. They won 3 games, I think, this summer. all 3 of them had Talia, or was it 4?
Right.
They won a number of games. Every single game, whether it's mid lane or jungle, had Talia in it, because they don't actually know how to coordinate their map movements very well. So they need someone to have a zip button to just like go global into the fight. Because when they look for the big engages, they need someone to just have the extra terrain to put up to kind of like control things a little bit more, and they need someone to be able to roam quicker to that. I feel like Mad Koi are now going through a very similar learning curve to what BDS did with the kind of Adam champion pool. It's like, okay, we don't really know how to play sidelines. Doesn't matter because we're playing this obnoxious top lane champion, which always brings an extra player over to a side lane to answer him. I think Mad Koi, because they are so far behind in terms of that, and particularly if we just get Talia banned the entire series, I think the way to beat Mad Lions is genuinely ban out Talia, see what they do. I don't think they have a very good fallback right now. This is maybe the most one-sided matchup in the first round, maybe, particularly because of that specific. It's up there. A lot of the matchups are one-sided. It's whatever. It's a bit of a much ado about nothing in that one. But yeah, I think BDS coming into this matchup should be really, really confident, obviously. And I think Mad Koi, from what they've shown, I just don't think they have the tool sets to deal with BDS, who are probably the most organized and most and best coach team within EU right now.
I'll start on the Mad Lions side, because then we can bounce off some of the BDS topics which are better to explore. I'm with you. I actually think the reason why this is a terrible matchup is because the flaw of BDS and the strengths that they bring are so consistent that there's just no chance. Even though to be on 3, I actually don't think there's any chance for Mad Lions to win this. Like they are so mismatched in every regard. Whereas the joke is, I'm actually not even trolling. If I was Mad Lions, I would rather play Fnatic. I would rather hope for like a humanoid bad game, catch someone, Razork just play a bit off, or scoring in a little bit. I think at least you'd have like a mini chance, because when I look at like what Mad Lions have, like the problem is, I was making this point before, if anything, they should consider them living a charmed life that they're in these playoffs. They're not in these playoffs because they're good. That's because Rogue and Vitality were utterly toothless and just could not win games or get win conditions. Because you look at this roster, like, everyone saw in winter how you make the most of this roster. None of that is there now. Like, if you try and think, the joke is the only traditional carry role who's actually good, ironically, is Super, but because they don't even play through bot and can't get bot ahead, and Alvaro's withered on the vine, they don't even have that. Like, as everyone will know when I usually whine about the upset matchups, 1v9ing from ADC in 2024 is not a thing. It is not. Spoiler, I don't even say that just to defend upset. You can go watch the best ADCs in the world, like fucking Viper and Jackie Love. You can't 1v9. You need help from the other, if not your lane. Like, you've got to have that help. Yeah. So they don't have it in Mad Lions. So Super actually ends up just somewhat being locked in prison. Frescovi, as I've said on past episodes, your biggest problem, mate, is you aren't Spanish. And so this is I enjoy this last split, because you aren't going to be here as far as I can tell. Unless you're just willing to play for pennies, they're surely going to upgrade you. Yeah. You're another player, by the way. I'm not the biggest Nuke fan, but he'll dust you off consistently, mate. He'll take care of you in mid lane. I'm not even worried about that. And then, yeah, on the top lane one, saddest part is I really did think Merwin looked like this is going to be like, at a minimum, like a very exciting top laner. But man, he's become so ineffective, and suddenly he can't just pick all those crazy champions and make it work. And some of that's starting to feel like early Adam. Like, mate, wait a minute, that wasn't like a win off. That was just the shit you were good on that bizarrely you could make work. Maybe actually you weren't just picking stuff that no one knew. And so actually the main problem I have for Mad Lions, like I said, I don't think they have any chance. Now on the BDS one, obviously this one we're evaluating more towards BDS as a team. One of the reasons I agree with you can just tell this is like potentially the best coach team, is I'll use that analogy from the Premier League, right? So obviously in the title race this time around, you had Man City, you had Liverpool, the classic teams, right? But the difference is when Man City wins, everyone has a hard time of like, but how good is Guardiola though? He has like the joke is he has players on the bench that would start in contender teams. Like, he has a really cracked roster. Meanwhile, if on the other hand, my beloved Liverpool had fluked it and won the league, the reason everyone would say Klopp's the king is because he doesn't have a Ballon d'Or fucking candidate. Like, even if they'd have won the league, there was not, like, I don't care how horny some sports journalists would have been to put Van Dijk in there. He wouldn't really be a top 3 candidate for the Ballon d'Or. You know what I mean? Like, that's always like a fucking a playmaker, an attacking player, and also it's not 2019 anymore. Spoiler, it's half a decade later. So the difference is, if Liverpool do well, you can tell they're well coached. They're working with slightly lesser pieces, and not always perfect pieces that are, it's in this way you use it that it's well. Because that's the thing I find very interesting about BDS is, I think in Fnatic, Nymaera actually does a good job because I think he has a lot of weird idiosyncratic players, even Razork, that he has to just find a blueprint that works. I think in BDS, it is genius the way they do it because they have idiosyncratic players. But as you say, it's not that they have one blueprint. They have a system, and the system catches each of them when they fall. That's the craziest part. Like, the joke is, on paper, their best players, in theory, are the bot lane. The bot lane doesn't have to get ahead every game. They are so good around those objectives and those team fights. They're going to get the fucking angles. They're going to catch people. They're going to get a free early kill on someone where you shouldn't and they were slightly behind. The one thing I want to bring up initially, well, they've got a couple of topics for this one, it is the Xiao topic. This is the player, as much as people are going to think I bang on Adam and Nook for obviously, I mean, they literally talk shit to me on social media. I have a reason to be motivated to bang on these guys. And they're
all
just
they're
also so easy to pick apart, aren't they? Like, obviously Adam does, like I've always said, mate, you should literally every day you walk in that BDS practice room, kiss the ring of Striker and then tithe him his check of 10% of your salary. Because I tell you what, we put you on GiantX, mate, then we'll see you go to work. Because I've always said, I think you'd do some of this shit whether they had this set up for you or not. Like, same as that's why it is genius how they do the sideline. The joke is he's going to die, but as long as he does his job and he is the laser pointer to the cats, then you have done your job. And also, like you say, they're the team that does understand what to do on the rest of the map. So we can also make that work. We can balance out your, let's say, unbridled aggression. And obviously, I usually bang on Nuke because, I love players who are sort of boring mid laners. Yeah, but I like them to actually be gods of laning. He's just he's like the boring mid laner that even I'm bored of. Like, if you go, yeah, but you like Larson, isn't he like Larson? Larson will win all these fucking lanes. When Larson's on his prime, one thing he was very good at, like Frogger was, he's really good at fucking CSing, mate. And I'm not talking about hitting the minions. I mean, knowing when to fight someone for it, when to use an ability, when not to get ganked, when to do the base timer and stuff. These guys were masters of that. But I'm not going to bang on either of those players. I think in their team, they do their job as well. The one player I always worry about is Xiao. This is the player where I remember when he first came in and they got good in that spring split last year, he was having a mad glow up and everyone was like, oh, maybe this is a new talent. Dude, this guy seems first of all, he seems very champion specific. And then also, he's just a bit fragile. There's some games where I do feel like he gets lost or he doesn't know what to do next or something.
Xiao is that's a fun conversation to have because he was part of this class of it was Yike, Xiao, and 113 that were all in the LFL at the same time, and I think Skeens as well in Vitality.
Oh yeah,
so there were a couple of these really good junglers around LFL at that time, and you had someone like Yike who was clearly going to be a star. This guy was clearly going to be up there. He even I think he was waiting, one of those players that was waiting for the right offer before he went up there. You had 113 who was just the little gremlin psychopath in your jungle that would occasionally,
he was just super aggro.
He was just super aggro and he'd die early, but then somehow he just skirmish and team fight his way through because
he was doing some whip where you go through the end, don't you?
Yeah, it's just look, if I'm going to be aggressive at some point, may as well hone my instincts now, get the deaths out early. And that was kind of fun. Xiao was weird. It's almost he's just kind of someone. It's the best analogy I can think of is kind of the in the pocket kind of drummer. You get what I mean? Where it's not someone doing all these great drum fills and stuff. He's just always where you need him to be at the right time. Where Xiao is not going to be someone who is going to be heavy carry, explosive ganks all the time, but he does have a pretty good sense of timing to make the right play at the right time. That was always his skill set within LFL, where it's you could tell he was falling behind in terms of CS and maybe not getting the big lane ganks. But when it came to comboing up with the support or in his mid laner, he'd be there at the right kind of moment to make sure that something important happened, even if his kind of his efficiency at the rest of the game was maybe a little bit less. And yeah, I think that Xiao's probably the player who benefits the most from the systems that BDS have put in place. The fact that they're very organized and the fact that when Xiao is caught, you can immediately just snap all in instead of just dying for free. I think that's something that God, there was a game today between JDG and FPX at the time of recording this where, missing, obviously, a legendary player at this point, he was getting caught out and his team wasn't there at the point where he could turn around and all in. Because, there's no point you turning around and blowing your flash and comboing at that point. No one's going to be there to follow you. Xiao, if he's in a similar situation, if he's caught, he can just go in and, the rest of the team can follow up in. And I think particularly with the meta right now having stuff like Zeri, Kai'Sa, Tristana, Corki in mid lane, even stuff like the top laners, which are weirdly quite mobile themselves, especially when you're playing stuff like Gragas, Body Slam, and ult, that's going to hit you from a mile away. The follow-up range is pretty high in the meta right now, and I think that helps a lot of EU carries, by the way, because I think not many EU carries are great at positioning on a mobile carries as it stands, which is it's another problem. But I think that because Xiao is just kind of benefiting from the systems where actually everyone's knowing the area of the map to play around, those kind of moments where he's caught out, are less impactful because his team is ready to respond either to make an even trade or make a winning play of it. Yeah, I don't think this guy's ever going to be the star carry. Like I said, when it kind of comes to, you know, I wasn't a big fan of the Karthus game. He played this split. His position was kind of off. He ended up getting caught out in some points. And Karthus, it's very punishing when we're in the wrong position. And of course, a couple of players have found that out across LEC so far. But yeah, I think when it comes to like that class of LFL talent, he's the player which was not going to be like the superstar, but is pretty good to just kind of like run with the rhythm and make sure that he's on the right page with everyone else. I think that was very obvious in winter and spring, where BDS had like this really good ability to just like always find a play through mid lane, because they'd always have a jungle support play that would just like go forwards at the right time to catch people out. And it was just the right time in the game to make the play. They were pretty good at judging that. If you miss it by a couple of seconds, maybe someone's there a little earlier, or maybe they can get a cross map or something like that. Typically, they've been pretty good at that, which does bring around to another player which I would like to talk about in regards to that, which is I do think that Labrov has taken a step down from winter. I think
it's not the cracked play he was then. He's probably the MVP then. Yeah, he was mega.
Yeah, no, and I have to say that's gonna be this is one of my real pet peeves with awards when it comes to like split awards when it comes to LEC and even like LPL, and LCK is pretty egregious for it. If you look back at solely those awards and you just look, you know, in a couple of years' time when people obviously get introduced to the new sport stuff, if you're looking through the awards and you don't see Labrov on that MVP, be like, oh, he was a good player. You don't really get that perspective. How damn good this guy was. He was continually finding massive plays, and again, like the stuff like the Blitzcrank games.
Oh, any hook champion he was a demon on, yeah.
Yeah, and like just being able to sit through like a winning mid lane matchup, run past the wave, and then just gonna like hook people back. Absolutely insane at doing that. He was really high on his skill shot accuracy with that. Like this guy was changing the game. Particularly in a split where I don't think support was doing that well in EU. Particularly since Mickey was. I have no idea how Mickey cut. But didn't Mickey get over first All Pro for him too in that split, which was like.
I think he did, but that was one of those like faker getting MVP award.
Yeah, that was, you know. Yeah. Look, I love Mickey. That wasn't the Mickey split, folks. That was the Labrov split. Yeah, I think that Labrov right now, he's the guy that's over-aggressing, really. Like, there are a couple of times where in mid lane, he's kind of, well, once you've taken the mid lane out of turret, he's trying to, like, dive onto the inner turret with, like, a flash rail engage and everything. So, whereas Sheo is doing that with his team behind him, Lavrov is sometimes doing that, and he's going so far that even the systems of BDS cannot save him from his own hubris at that point. It's not quite that bad. And again, like, he's still a good player, but I feel like if we get Lavrov to the point where he is genuinely back up to MVP caliber again, I think BDS are going to be such a fun team to watch. I mean, they already are, but I think at that point they might even be considered, you know, favorites for the league at that point. Getting to that point, because again, I do think that BDS on proper form with all players at peak have shown they can contend with the very best teams in EU. Especially if you catch a team like G2, obviously slacking off a little bit. But yeah, I think that I think that BDS right now, like, there's a whole load of reasons to just say, look, even if you just turn nameplates off and you look at the systems that they play through in terms of, like, the way the jungle support move together, the way they play sidelines, that would already put them up against Mad Lions, because that's some of the stuff that they're the worst at. I challenge you to watch Frescovi's Corki games and see how he plays in sidelines. It is one of the worst performances you will see. He was, like, teleporting into sidelines and immediately dying. I think that, like, I just look at this matchup. This is very much, of all the first round matchups, the more I think about it, this is the Hydrogen Bomb versus Coughing Baby. This is not close, thinking about it. On individual levels as well, it's like, maybe Yoya has some good... Yoya did look better in the last week, and I think he died, like, what, once or twice the entirety of his weekend, even through the tiebreakers, or the winning games which they had. He was really good on the snowball there. But you can't be a jungler alone again, right? It's so hard.
No, you also can't 1v9 like that. And by the way, he definitely wasn't in those first weeks. He was having some nightmares.
Absolutely not. Yeah, so I think, Mad Koi, this is about as bad as it gets. I think Mad are a team which we very clearly saw an identity for them in winter. We talked about that no end. They have kind of scrapped that identity, and I think one of the reasons they looked really pants is that they've had to rebuild something. I don't really agree that they should have done it in the first place, because I like the way that they played. They're now, at least they're playing around some globals now. I've liked when they've had like Talia Kaiser, when they have like the ability for Super to reposition into a play where actually he's kind of been struggled to be peeled around on some of the less mobile AD carries. Maybe that's something that can work for them. I feel like their identity isn't that well formed right now, though, where again they're playing a little bit more towards top side. They're just kind of leaving their carries to be on more mobile stuff with again like the semi-globals, the Talia Kaiser to kind of join in on plays. And because it's a newly formed identity, going up against a team which is like really, really honed what they're doing, that is about worst case scenario. So yeah, sadly for Mad, they need to show me an awful lot, or this is gonna be a wipe.
Yeah, what's funny is the two teams, this is one of the reasons I actually do think, I've had this take the whole time, I feel like everyone finally agrees with me, it took you all a while, right? I actually am not that big a hater of the LEC format. Like, I don't think that's why the teams are shit. I actually think the reason the teams are shit is bad GMing, but in the sense of, like, it's just not the right mixes of players. It's not even always, like, the bad GMing on a pure sense. If you look at some of the names, like, the Joker's Vitality, if anything, it looks like there should be the GM job of the year on paper, that you're upgrading all the time, you're getting to where we want to be. It's just, when you see them in the server, it doesn't work. There's no synergies. In fact, some of the players have anti-synergies that make them worse and just incapable of even getting to like a close-out of portion of a game, etc. The difference is, if you look at the top end, this is also why at the moment G2 is just on like that S+ tier and everyone else is A+, as it were. Because when you look at Fnatic and BDS, like the main contenders, bro, if you were cynical and you were another team out there, right? Obviously, with Fnatic, you just sign Razork away, right? But that doesn't quite work because they're Fnatic. At the end of the day, they'll always have the draw of like, but he probably wants to stay in Fnatic. When I see BDS, if I was the cynical bastard, because this is a move that everyone used to do in the Counter-Strike scene, Nymaera, you don't just recruit to get a good player yourself. You try and kill your enemy. Yeah. You try and take his star away, because then first he can't beat you, and fuck it, if it doesn't work, we don't have him either. We essentially deny them, right? The obvious player from BDS you would just steal is Labrov. If you took him out of this team, you know what? I believe in the BDS coach stuff, but good luck on that search for that support in the RLs, boys, because I don't know who the fuck you'd be getting. I don't know who you'd be getting that could do what this guy can do.
Closest you get is Camilius. I think Camilius is pretty good, but like I think EU support in general probably are. Well, given that top lane has stepped up, I think support's now our weakest role again.
Makes sense.
I thought for a while it was top lane. I think that support, even with Trimby coming back in, he's been on a little bit up and down. It's quite hard to show what's happening on that team, because again, they're just the vanilla ice cream of League of Legends right now. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've really enjoyed watching Labrov this year, and even if he is over-aggressive, I appreciate that he's doing something more interesting than the other supports, and you know what? That's worthwhile for me.
And in that team, think about it, right? If you've got players like Shi or Nuke, I mean, even sometimes Ice to be another champion, you've got players who aren't naturally like super aggro players. Like, you balance it out a bit. You can have one guy be the wild card and the madman a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think that, like, every team needs a psychopath.
Yes.
Like, every team needs one to do that. I think maybe Labrov, it's gotten to him a little too much. Where, like, you used to have Crowny.
The saying in the NBA, Nymaera, is everyone needs, like, a delusional confidence guy. Yeah. You need one guy who really does think he's, like, fake green when he isn't fake. You know what I mean? But you balance it by having the rest do the job properly, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they used to have Crowny. And I credit to BDS. I mean, look, Crowny obviously has his upsides. I think that BDS kind of, like, found out that when it got to a high enough level of play, Crowny could very much win you games with aggressive plays. Pretty much every game, even when you were ahead, he could always lose you. And he'd
always give it. It's like Niski. He'll always give you a chance back in. He's very British. They're very British in that sense. It's sort of the sporting chance, isn't it? Like, you got to give him a chance. You know, once you're winning, you fight one-handed. You know, something like that.
Yeah. By the way, so I live in Berlin, and obviously the Euros are happening in Germany right now. So I watch the games on stream, and God, I fucking hated Southgate ball. This stuff is just seeing a corner go back towards the enemy side of it. Absolutely awful. However, one thing which I do find uniquely funny is that everyone watches the games out on the streets and all the Spätis and all the bars and stuff. I get like a 10-second spoiler warning from when I'm watching the stream. I hear everyone scream about it on the street. So I find out about the freaking great Bellingham goal like 5 seconds before it happens. All right, that was one of the moments of the tournament. That gets ruined for me, and I'm quite upset about that.
In that case, well, the irony is, like, put it this way, that's why I even say it. I grumble also for the first 75 minutes of the game. Oh, shit, you're ruining it with you. But because at the moment, it's like the perfect roller coaster. You get the hype at the end. Like, they always pull out. You're actually not even getting to enjoy that. Like, at least I get to watch that live. Like, oh my God, he did it. He scored. But, like, you're actually like, oh shit, they scored in a minute. Like,
sometimes I have to judge the tone of what's happening outside. Is it a missed chance? Is it a proper goal? It's all over the place. And obviously, when Germany lost, it was very quiet. Yeah. Anyway, but that was just the whole thing. And I like the fact that BDS have a bit more of that tempered aggression, and it feels like it does feel like on the whole, unlike some other teams where someone goes in, I think Fnatic are kind of really prey to this, where they will often bite off more than they can chew. BDS are pretty good at making sure they have at least all the pieces in one place to immediately commit when the big scale conflict comes through. And I think they've also been pretty good at cutting their losses as well. On the whole, sometimes even a G2, this is maybe G2's biggest flaw actually, and Fnatic have this point where they will sometimes have the pieces to follow up for that big play, but they don't quite realize when they shouldn't do that as well. BDS is still pretty good on the whole, being like, okay, right, you're caught, hands up, you're gonna die, at least the rest of us are gonna live. So yeah, I think that's also another thing which I think means that BDS are pretty good at that, the whole coaching thing. They're pretty good at assessing team fights as they start. I think they're really good at assessing all of the factors of the current patch and the current champions in meta right now. So yeah, I really hope this team keeps it together. They've not always been a team that have done that great when it comes to like high pressure scenarios. You know, most of their like biggest best of fives have been pretty poor.
Yep.
This is the time to strike, though. I think with Fnatic taking a step back, with you on really good form in terms of your understanding of the meta, this is probably the time to strike, if any.
No, I have to say, despite what people think about like the player rivals, I actually find BDS one of the most enjoyable teams to watch. Like I keep saying, because it's a compliment, if you are a fan of Team Liquid and in LCS and BDS in this league, they are kind of like LCK teams. I like the way that they have like a clear rationale about what they're doing. They clearly have protocols in place that people are following. People, as you say, they aren't just making hero players. You're actually doing things together. That's something I'll always appreciate in League of Legends. Actually, by the way, a quality which I don't get to big up, sadly, because half the time I'm having to counter an that T1 are the best. It's actually also why I like T1. T1's another team that clearly has a total game plan of what they want to do. They know who they're playing through, what picks are going to do. They build up the comps quite logically. I do enjoy that type of league. Like the difference is, as much as like Fnatic's exciting, if anything, I find it infuriating that it is just like star power winning you the games. Like that's the analogy I didn't give you before. I agree also. Fnatic is the team that they don't have like plan A. They have a game plan. Yeah. When the game plan goes to shit, if the analogy was...
It's totally vibes.
If the game plan works, right, it's like the analogy is you walk up and you just open the door and you go through it. If the game plan doesn't work, whereas like BDS or G2, you know, they like pick the lock or they come in through the window, all Fnatic does is take a running charge with their elbow, and their elbow, by the way, is just Razork. And basically, if they can blast that door open, they can still even win the game sometimes, but fucking hell can they also throw the game as well. Like, this team, like, as you saw at ES3, the floor on this team is also horrific. It's scary as fuck. Like I tell you what, the joke is here's the analogy. Nightshare himself must be getting the England national team watching experience while watching these games, mate. I bet he's fucking pepping sweating the whole time.
Well, the funniest thing about the whole football analogies with this too is that when it comes, apparently the Man City players, which are part of this really well coached, like their systems are blah blah blah. Apparently, a load of those players don't get picked for national teams because it's really hard to break them out of that style.
Dude, I think you can see that with people like Foden, right? It sort of seems like it's true.
Yeah. And now the problem is, like, you have teams like, well, I mean, the England analogy, where, like, you have to rely on individual excellence because the systems aren't doing it. And it's really hard to do that because a lot of these players have had that bled out of them, which is somehow so disappointing. At least with Fnatic, they've just said, look, you're going to play the way you're going to play.
It's just who we are.
Let's just give you the tools. Yes. Let's just hope that your laning phase is solid and that you don't get set back on the map. And they are the improv artists of the LEC right now. Like, even when it comes to something like G2, I feel like G2 have more cutting kind of like foresight where they've set up plays in advance. Fnatic, like, I don't know what the hell this team's doing half the time. At least they give themselves the right ingredients to make something special out of, where, you know, they have themselves that, again, the higher level vision control is better from them than it is from other teams and whatever. But yeah, as opposed to a team, you know, like BDS or G2 or whatever, I feel like it is much more organic rather than predetermined when it comes to them, which it does mean they have a high upper ceiling, which is, you know, if they don't know what they're doing, how the hell is the other team going to know what they're going to do at the same time? I do think right now that teams like BDS and of course teams like G2 as well, their pedigree and their laning phase and the ability to just move around, organize, clear out vision, and stop you getting these like individual ingredients to work with, it's really hard to fight against because they're just on really good form. And if you are not working in your star roles and you're not having good bot lane laning phase as well, you're just reducing all of these abilities to kind of like give yourself extra things to fire at the enemy team, you know?
Right, what we'll do for this last one, because obviously it's the G2 KC one, and on paper, like, the joke is, if you actually do predict KC to win, and they do win, I assume it's like those famous stories of when people get those insane worlds brackets where you have to get every result right, and you remember the famous one where ANX did beat like Rocks Tigers, and the guy just said, I was drunk when I filled it out. Like, there's no way, there's no rationale you could have for why KC would win. So I'll start on this one, because I want to just say on the KC side, here's why I don't even have a fake narrative for you. Because as you imagine, if you look at this team, the two ways you win is through Vladdy or Upset. They're the obvious players that can do it, right? I mean, spoiler, anyone who watched the LCK knows that Kana isn't Thanatos. He's not like, oh my God, it's an upcoming player who could be really good. He's a very known quantity, who's incredibly known quantity, and very much, by the way, it even seems like he knows where his job is. Again, he's the Korean De Antonio in this analogy, except just more skilled. So if you think about the way they're going to play, right, the problem is Vladdy is a pure rookie, and I actually think this is the most unfair type of rookie, where his first rookie split is summer split in a 3-split system, and what does he have to do in the first playoff game? Just go against like prime caps. Like, so already, if you're Vladdy, you know what, mate, you're your excuse today. Whether you turn up or not, I don't mind. I will not blame you. You've already shown me a few games in the regular season. But the problem is, people think now, Nymaera, what I'm going to do is go into the upset spiel. Because obviously, they clearly do sometimes get upset in a position. He gets the kills early on where he looks like he has on the champion that can carry. But here's the one problem I have. I do think what has changed in these dreaded 10th place splits in Vitality and now Carmine Corp for upset is he's one of those people where even though he has the skill set of a Forgiven, sometimes he goes personality-wise towards the reckless angle and he clearly loses faith in people and he gets more and more paranoid and you can just see in the game he doesn't always commit in the way. Whereas I love to praise the Kazis and the Jackalovs where they'll just go in and you could make them look like a complete dickhead if you don't help, but they'll go in trusting that everyone will do it and then they'll carry the fight. Upset's still got that thing where it's like, I step forwards, but if it's dodgy, I'll step back. You know, he still has that in him. Yeah. So even though people might think I'm going to say, give Upset the picks and he'll win you a game, for example, the reason why he might not is a psychological one, Nymaera, which is, I actually know that Upset is one of those guys where when he sees someone like Hans Sama, he doesn't think he's better than me. He thinks that's like one of my fucking peers. I actually think I'm better than him. In fact, you know what? Years ago, he was overrated and I was like underrated. This is the kind of guy he would be super horny to beat. But the problem is, if you add all those pieces together, I feel as if the game starts going badly, and especially if G2 ganks the fuck out of bot lane, this could just be where you just play out that safe game where you don't look bad, you don't look like the idiot that lost us the game, but you don't go balls to the wall and give you... Because for this one, if you're the KC guys, you have to really play like they shoot you in the head at the end if you lose the game. You have to just go for it, and if you lose, you lose, so what? You have to just think, fuck it, because it's going to be such an uphill fucking challenge to win, even this BO3, mate.
Yeah. Yeah, this is pretty rough. KC showed some better stuff towards the end of the split. I think like they've
it's a way better team than the old French lineup, put it that way. That's clear.
Yeah. Yes. And I think so there is a, you know, weirdly, I just remember this interview that came out. I can't remember if it was 2022 Worlds. It might have been 2023 as well. It was one of the Worlds where both Hans Sama and Upset went to international. And there was a player, it might have been Mako, it might also have been Deft. A big player, I can't remember this, where they were basically talking about how, you know, how would you rate the EU AD carries and stuff, and they're saying, well, you know, pretty good in laning phase, they have these, like, mastery of these picks and stuff, but I don't feel their team fighting is that impactful. And they were talking about, well, actually, the team fight positioning of these AD carries means that they're not really in position to sweep the fights, and they may be a little conservative with their positioning. And I think over both of these guys' careers, we have seen that in different moments. I think, weirdly, at MSI, for Hans Sama, you saw both sides of this, where you had the first series versus T1, where actually his team fight positioning was way too conservative, and then you had the game versus Top Esports as well, that play there, where he just like absolutely bodied Jackalov and Mako. I think this is quite apparent to Upset in some ways now, because I think also they found a way to remedy this in some moments. I think Upset, because the way you move as an AD carry, your positioning doesn't have implications always in the immediate second after you step forwards. It's sometimes the next 3, 4, 5 seconds where actually you're saying, actually, I want to step into this pocket where I can follow up on someone if my team goes forwards, but maybe I get punished if someone steps into me as well. You know, it's that kind of like predicting the next step in the team fight. And Upset quite often has taken the back step as opposed to the front step in regards to that, which means that when the team fight goes on, he's already out of position to do that extra damage. He has done really, really well when he gets something like the Kai'Sa, which gives you that instant reposition button where it's like, okay, I made this mistake in positioning at the start of the team fight, but now I can get right in there. And we could see that versus, God, was it Vitality, when Vitality had that massive gold lead on Photon on the Aatrox, and then it was Upset with the huge quadra kills and Kai'Sa and stuff. I think that's been quite important from Upset. I think this is why we're seeing a lot more Kai'Sa in EU. I think that we're still seeing a lot more Zeri. Zeri can help with that too. And again, you've got so much movement speed, and you get that E over the wall that can help too. And even stuff like the Jinx, which can reset, and that move speed can help you too. Can help sometimes cover up some of those flaws within Upset. And I think the problem is, I think that Upset has had, a great career record if you look at just the eye test, even though he's had a lot of these last place finishes. I do think on Carmine Core, he has been positioning way too conservatively. Like everyone's been saying this is not a new thing. He's been positioning conservatively, and it means that he can't really fix this kind of team fight positioning error at the start of things. I think that if they do at least get themselves something like the Kai'Sa or the Zeri, maybe we could see Upset affect these team fights a little bit more. Obviously, I mentioned Hans Sama in regards to this, and the other bit of that too. I think Hans Sama has been much better at stepping forwards too in their good games as well. Even though if it might have been something that was called out by other players in the past, I for the life of me, I can't remember where that interview came from, but I definitely remember that very strongly. So yeah, I think there are a couple of things working for Carmine Core in regards to their bot lane laning phase has been better. I think Targamas has been better in regards to that. There was one game back in winter which I used to use as a really good example of why Upset and Targamas are just not a good laning pair, which was their first matchup versus Mad Koi, where at level 1 they played around Caitlyn Ashe or something like that. It was something like really lane dominant, where you've got these two things where these are two champions which are balanced around how strong their level 1 is, because if it is too strong, like, it just ruins the entire game.
Yes.
But there's so much value put into it. You need to play through that level 1. And they lost the level 1 to like an Aphelios Renato because they stacked up and got hit by one skill shot on both people. And it's like, okay,
oh yes,
what the hell's happening
yes,
here?
I remember this.
Yeah, so there were a couple of times like that where there's like, okay, some of the laning stuff is just not as good. Funnily enough, you zoom forward to the game they had against Mad Koi in this regular split, and at level 1 they were zoned out, and they had like, I think they had Ashe Rel or something like that. I remember they had a Rel, I can't remember the exact draft. Where actually the level 1, they showed much better awareness of that. Where actually, I think they were playing Jinx, that was it. I think it was Jinx Rel or something like that. Where they had like, the enemy team were kind of like stood in the enemy bush, but they were just outspacing them, at least trading auto for auto, and they weren't taking too many bad trades, and actually they had a lot better level understanding of that level 1. I think we have seen some improvements to the game plan, which means that at least the laning phase isn't like, as it was at the start of the year, instant lose. I think that it gives them a bit more of a platform. Problem is, when you're coming up against a team like G2 are like the one kill lane bot lane in the entirety of the LEC. Maybe you could say the Rahel and Luon are on the side of SK as well, but like, if you don't, if you give G2 like a good Draven lane or a good Kalista lane still, even though they are less meta, they will still just put you into the dirt. And as you were saying, if you shut down Upset, we've seen what happens to KC before. You have to rely on Vladdy. I have a soft spot for Vladdy. I cast him in back in NLC in 2022. Yeah. So I cast him when he was back on Riddle in the NLC, and he was, even back then, like a big duelist player. He, in fact, he had a load of matchups in that split against M&S, who obviously went on to become Cloud9's mid laners, because both those mid laners were in the NLC at that point. And he was like a big Yone player. Of course, he was a Vladimir player as well, though. No surprise they're given his name. And, you know, I think he has done a pretty damn good job stepping into the shoes of what should have been a Poison Chalice scenario. I don't think it's enough versus a G2, which are just across the board looking just really pretty damn good right now, especially for LEC standards. I think that their laning has gone up through the roof, particularly with, I think Caps at EWC looked like the one laner who just really woken up. It's always a bit of a coin flip with G2. We're thinking, okay, are they going to wake up at this point? Are we going to have Caps and Mickey on the downturn? Are they going to be showing up for everything? I think for LEC, the big problem with Casey is that your win conditions are really just slim in regards to, you need to have Upset on a reposition AD carry. You probably want something like the Talia onto Vladdy as well, so we can control some space, which helps with that. But doing that against G2 is just the worst of all scenarios, where they are really good at kill lanes. They're really good at shutting you down. And whenever you look for those snappy plays, they are the best team at just hands checking you and basically saying you have to react within the next second or two, or you will lose a huge fight. Some of the best teams in the world will push the teleport key very quickly within that, and they'll make sure that G2 have a bit enough more than they can chew, and they've all in on a situation that they lose. That's not the case within LEC very often. So KC, they would have to play out their minds, and I just don't see them winning across the board. It's so hard for them on an individual basis and on a kind of like a skirmishy basis as well.
Even if they do win one game, it's where then G2 just does like the meme of like they sit forwards like on the Xbox, you know, like, and then they just win easy in the third game or whatever, you know. No, actually, I have a similar comment, actually. When I did my interview with Kazi quite recently, that was his take on the 2021 year when he won the championships. Even though on paper, everyone would be telling him the whole time, like, had Sama and Upset are better than you. His theory was similar to Mako's, if it was indeed Mako. He said, like, yeah, they were better laners, but the difference was I was better in the team fights, so that's why essentially I won the championship. So, interesting comment. I know what we'll do at the end here. Since obviously with the cycle of people, I don't know yet whether you'll be back on this split or whether we'll be back for next year, etc. What we'll do is, obviously, it's boring to predict who will win, but to predict who will come second, Nymaera, that's the question of all questions. So who are you plumping for? Who do you want to come, not as in want to, but who do you think will come second? Who are you going to put your money on?
So I think the battle right now is between SK and BDS, and I think because of stylistic matchup, I think it has to be BDS, because SK, I love the way that they play aggressively. I do think they have some issues in wider map states where, like, Irrelevant's playing out side lane really well, and Nissy's gone to a side lane, but actually what happens to Rahel in mid lane when he can't play aggressively, I think that can be a bit of an issue. The one caveat is BDS are just known sometimes to lose those high-pressure best-of-5s. They can just do that. That's the one caveat, but I don't really want to take that into account. I am going to choose that will not be a factor. On the gameplay that we have seen, BDS are just a really good stylistic matchup into them. And sadly for the side of Fnatic, Yeah, they could all turn up on the right day, but I think that as it stands, like, I just can't trust this team if this is the way that their carries are playing currently. They are a highly improvisational team. They do have the pieces to win this, but based on gameplay, it has to be BDS.
This is what shows that either I'm not a hater or I'm just an incredibly complex hater with a lot of different dimensions to it. Because I'm actually also going to pick BDS, mate. I was thinking about this before I asked you. Because look, if I was a true hater, it's actually very easy to just gamble on form with SK or to just go Fnatic, Humanoid and Razork.
Yeah.
Step 3, question mark. Wow, we won the game. That could happen. But the reason I am going to go on BDS because, like I said, I think they have the best fallback setup of any team in the league. They're really cogent and coherent with how they play. They seem to. This is why I know they're well coached. They seem to totally understand the profile of all the players in their team. I don't even think that is true for Fnatic and SK. I think even they have it off. And then the reason why on the SK side I just can't put my faith in them at the moment till I see it done is because one, I've never seen this lineup play best of 5. That's a big deal. True. And then I just think of the two players that actually scare me. It's not the bot laners, it's Isma and Niski. Like Niski, I don't know what happened to this guy this year. I mean, to be fair, he even did this in Mad Lions. I think there's actually why El Yoya didn't fuck with him. Bro, he is so irresponsible with the lead. You know what I mean? He will just, like I said, that's the joke is he's like an English gentleman. It's like, well, give him a sporting chance. Like, no, don't give him a sporting chance, Niski. When Caps is ahead, he just steps on your throat and ends the game. You just do that one extra play or move that doesn't need to be done, that just gives the other team a way back in. And then on Isma's, I just think he's a player where you always have to remember he's still a rookie. Like, this is a player that's clearly inexperienced. He has shown some fragility. And so I don't diss him. I actually think he's had some up games. I think he's actually done a decent enough job in this team with the sort of Niski factor, whatever that means. But I just think it's hard for me to bet on these guys. I'd love to see them be really good because I actually do hope one way or another SK is one of the Worlds teams. I think it would be kind of a cool narrative to head into Worlds with as opposed to the known quantities. But I'm with you. I think BDS just has the quality. They just get it done and they're so consistent.
And if you ever need an example of that Niski kind of like, what the hell's he doing with the lead? They had a game where he was 8-0 versus, God, who was it? It was versus, it wasn't versus T1. It was versus one of the Chinese teams, but like, he was like 8-1 on Silas versus Ari. I think I can't remember exactly.
Was it BLG?
Is it something BLG? Like that?
I think the one with Yagao maybe. Last year we're talking about, yeah?
Yes, I think it was that. Yes, I think that was it. At MSI 2023. He was 8-0 or something like that on Silas and still managed to lose that game. Like, if you're an 8-0 Silas, if you give it that's talent right there, buddy. You can't like throw leads like that easily. And I think Niski is one of those players for SK, and this is kind of the remainder, like that shadow of the hallmark that SK were really bad once Plan A failed. Because I think that's when the panic set in. I think it's Niski, obviously intelligent enough to realize, okay, Plan A's gone to shit. What do I do now? But his response was like one of the worst things you could do in that game. Where like, I think it was one of the games they lost against Karmine Core back in. It was one of the few games that Karmine Core won earlier in the year in like winter or spring. So he flashes over Wolf Pit, just randomly dies late game on Talia. There was a lot of that, and yeah, I think when it comes into the high pressure best of fives, when Isma's already been under pressure, I think Niski has that factor to him. I love the way that SK play when they're ahead and they're on the game plan. There are still some kind of like remaining shackles holding the back right now. I think BDS, for me, I feel like BDS are playing the League of Legends they want to play, and that's a big thing for me. So yeah, for me, I think they are, at this moment, clearly second best. There's all sorts of extra factors which go into that. I don't know whether we have another patch change coming in. I don't think we'll have that mid-playoff, so that won't factor in at least. But yeah, I think as it stands, BDS very clearly second place, especially given the current form of Fnatic, but also the stylistic mismatch against for them in favor of them against SK.
Right, obviously, it wasn't Dom again, but will it be Dom next week?